Hi, this is Eve Golden for the Everett collection with our first in a series of Hollywood mystery deaths. So, when they first reopened the whole Natalie Wood death mystery, I was 2 inches away from my TV, gaping at all the coverage and telling my friends I was watching Blue Planet on BBC America, and don't lie, you were doing the exact same thing. Much to my annoyance, they did not have one scrap of new evidence, except for some person who suddenly remembers back in 1981, he saw people chasing each other around the yacht, yelling and imagining Benny Hill yakety sax music playing in the background or something. Now, as for me, I contend that the most boring theory is usually the right one. Natalie was untying the dinghy, banging against the boat. She fell overboard. I mean, if somebody pushed her, why was the dinghy untied? Answer me that. There are 3 major kinds of mystery deaths: the whodunit, the was it murder or was it suicide, and the general overall, seriously, what the hell? Today, we got people whose cause of death is not a mystery. These poor folks were shot or stabbed or beaten to death. And in some cases, no suspect was ever found. In others, the suspect was just never charged or never convicted. Tops in the unknown shootings, of course, are Tupac Shakur and the notorious B.I.G, who would hate that they are always mentioned in the same breath. The West Coast Tupac and the East Coast Biggie were at the top of the rap game when they were both gunned down, Tupac in Las Vegas in late 96 and Biggie in LA in early 97. Suspects, they range from a former bodyguard to death row records Suge Knight to rogue cops to the FBI to jealous fellow rappers. As far as I know, Robert Wagner has not been questioned yet. One of Hollywood's first murder mysteries was William Desmond Taylor, who was then Paramount's top director. He was shot at his home in 1922, and it turns out that just about every star in Hollywood was either a pal of his or a lover of his, or he'd helped them get to rehab counseling. Teenage star Mary Miles Minter had a mad crush on him, and the chief suspect has always been Mary Miles Minter's mother, probably because it's such fun to say Mary Miles Minter's mother. Poor Mary Miles Minter's career ended with a crash after this. She wound up as this Norma Desmond, Baby Jane type recluse, very depressing. A little closer to our time is Barbara Colby, who was a terrific stage and TV actress. You might remember her as this wisecracking hooker on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Well, she and actor James Kiernan were leaving an acting class when they were gunned down in LA in 1975. According to the LA Times, in just 40 minutes, 2 women and a man were murdered, and 6 other people were threatened or molested or robbed Thursday night in separate street attacks in the West Los Angeles, Santa Monica area. Nobody was ever arrested. No one was ever arrested in David Bacon's 1943 murder either. He was this wealthy Harvard grad who acted on stage with Jimmy Stewart and Henry Fonda and was really much better looking than either one of them, if you ask me. Came to Hollywood in 1942, but he was no Stewart or Fonda. He wound up co-starring in this serial, The Masked Marvel, and was appearing in Someone to Remember for Republic Studios. I mean, Republic Studios, for goodness sakes. When he was stabbed in his car after a lovely day at the beach, while his wife, singer Greta Keller, stayed at home being extremely pregnant. Now, TMZ would have had conniptions with the facts and the rumors that came pouring out about this. Keller and Bacon, and she was a lot older than he was, were married right after Bacon was arrested for dallying with a 15-year-old newsboy. Now, the 15-year-old newsboy was not responsible for his death. It was probably some trick he picked up at the beach, and unfortunately, the trick was never found. And still worse, Greta Keller miscarried their baby, which is just awful. Well, Rita Johnson wasn't technically beaten to death. Her unfortunate accident happened in 1948, and she didn't die till 1965, though her death was probably brought on by the near-fatal injuries and after effects and all that kind of stuff. Rita was really a terrific actress. You got to check her out in Here Comes Mr. Jordan, The Major and the Minor, Sleep My Love, The Big Clock. Terrific gal. Then in 1948, she was attacked by a vicious hairdryer gone rogue. At least that was her story, and she was sticking to it. In 1948, her hairdryer, one of those great big beauty parlor things, that went over her head, managed to fall over on her and apparently beat the living crap out of her, putting her in a coma with head trauma, blacking her eyes, bruising her arms and legs, and knocking a few teeth out. I really hope the manufacturer issued a recall on that thing. Rita went on to act in a handful of TV shows and movies, but she never really recovered, and she died at age 52. Everybody suspected there was a certain Hollywood character actor who was the actual hairdryer, but nobody was talking back in those days. Now, Bob Crane, you know him as Colonel Hogan, but he was so much more. He was a star disc jockey. He was a charming stage actor. He was an adorable presence on TV. He was on the Dick Van Dyke Show and the Donna Reed Show. And he also had a porn fixation that belonged in the Smithsonian under glass. He was beaten to death in his Scottsdale, Arizona hotel room in 1978, and his pal and fellow porn aficionado, John Henry Carpenter, was the chief suspect. Wasn't until 1992 that Carpenter was arrested. They had DNA evidence, but Carpenter was acquitted. There were a lot of people who wanted Bob Crane dead, unfortunately, and the murder remains officially unsolved. Ted Healy unleashed Three Stooges on the world, but that is not why he was beaten to death. Healy was a vaudeville comic and review comic who also turned in some really great movie performances. He was in Bombshell and Mad Love and San Francisco, but his real claim to fame was casting a series of comics as his troublemaking vaudeville stooges. Eventually, Moe Howard, Curly Howard, and Larry Fine settled in 1932. They appeared in 10 films with Healy in the early 30s, parted on not very good terms. In December 37, aged only 41, and Healy never looked 41 in his life, by the way, he was attacked and severely beaten outside the Trocadero on the Sunset Strip, died of his injuries at the home of his friend, comic Joe Frisco. Rowdy college fellows were blamed, as were several Hollywood big-shot actors and producers who were never named officially. Now, in later years, Milton Berle and Bob Hope and Red Skelton credited Healy with jump-starting their careers, but again, that's really no reason to beat somebody to death. Tune in again next week for more Hollywood mystery deaths.